What's up guys, Boss here, and in today's video we're going to be doing another tier list. So it's been a couple months since I've done the last one, and as you guys know, those of you who have seen it before, it's basically where I rank every single card in the game, and there's balances every couple months that, change the meta completely, so every card is going to be, in potentially a different position. I've played this game now for 6 years, kind of hard to believe, but I have a very good understanding of the game. I play a lot of ladder, I play some competitive, and I pretty much play this game on a daily basis. So let me know in the comments which of these rankings you guys agree with, but yeah, let's just go ahead and get started here. So the Wizard, I would probably go ahead and say that it's right now something like D tier. I know this might come off as, a surprise to some of you, mid-ladder players, especially who like using it, but I don't think it is that good, but at the same time, it's viable, so I wouldn't put it in F tier. There's definitely worse cards than it. Expo, I would say C tier right now. I think there's a lot of counters to it, and I think there's just win conditions in general that are a lot stronger, but with that being said, it is still a solid card, and if you're an Expo main, you can have a lot of success with it. Zap is going to be B tier. I feel like it's a decent small spell. You see it a lot in like Lava Hound and Sparky. Nothing too special though. There's a lot of small spells that are of course going to be better than it. Zappies, I would actually say right now are A tier because in this current meta, they're so good defensively against a lot of, different archetypes. Like one especially, which I'll get to, is, as you guys know, Electro Giant was recently buffed, and Zappies are just so good against it. They're just a solid counter for it. The healer, I actually think, is F tier. I think she is just really bad, and ever since she got nerfed, which was a while ago, I think just since then, she's just been a very weak card and only used in Elixir Golem. Battle Ram, I would actually say I want to say it's probably C tier. It's really decent in bridge spam decks. There's not just P.E.K.K.A, but also there's that, E-bar bridge spam deck that's really good. Bomb Tower, I think it's also probably C tier. There's a lot of buildings better than it, but it's definitely not D or F because you still see a decent amount of it in, minor wall breaker decks, especially decks like that. Bomber, I think I would put it in. I feel like Bomber might be. It's either B. It's probably B. I think B is fair. It's good in drill decks, and you also will sometimes see it in Golem. I don't know if I'd put it A, just because I don't think it's extremely versatile anymore. The Bowler, I'd actually say right now is A. This might come off as a surprise to you guys, but I think those of you especially who, if you watch competitive or higher up on ladder, you'll see it a lot. It's just a very good card when paired with the Tornado, and it has a lot of health, and I feel like sometimes when you play against it, you'll realize just how much health it has and how long it stays on the board, defensively, like in Lumber Loon Freeze or like Graveyard Freeze, it just ends up getting a lot of value. Cannon right now is actually A tier. I almost think it's almost right now S tier, but definitely A. I think ever since Champions came out, it's been a really strong card. It's just had great synergy with them, especially the Archer Queen. I don't know why, but there's a lot of good, for example, Hog Cycle Archer Queen decks with the Cannon, and then also with the Royal Hogs. Cannon Cart, I think, is, for the longest time I put it in S tier, but to be honest, I think right now it's A tier. I finally don't think it's S tier anymore. I know a lot of other people doing tier lists always put Cannon Cart in S. I think now is finally the time I put it in A. I think it's a very solid card, but I don't think it's at a point where I could say it should get a nerf. I think it's fine where it's at, but it's still a very, very good card, don't get me wrong. Clone, I think, is D tier. You could even argue that it's F, especially since there's not a lot of people using Golem Clone anymore. Really, the only people using Clone are just Lava Clone players, so you could even say it's F, but I just feel like Lava Clone is a somewhat strong archetype and has good synergy compared to like Elixir Golem. Elixir Golem is just really bad, but Lava Clone is actually viable, if that makes sense. Dark Prince, I think, is A tier. He's just very good, but I wouldn't quite put him in S because, he is quite easy to counter, and I think there are better alternatives besides just the Dark Prince. There's a lot of cards that deal splash, that some of which are also for Elixir. Dark Ob is also A. I think he's been really good, and we've seen that in the meta ever since he got that buff. It was a while ago, but ever since then he's been really strong. I think Archers are B. They also got a buff very recently. I think it was actually more recent than the Dark Gob, but they're definitely not OP or really strong, but they're better than they were before. Before they probably were in C, before that buff. So I actually think the Earthquake right now is C tier. It really took quite a hit after that emergency nerf, which I think was deserved, but you can tell they're a lot worse of a card. I would say the Earthquake is average right now. It's nothing special, but you can of course have success with it in with hog decks and, Royal Hogs EQ. The Electro Drag I would say is D tier, kind of the same scenario as the Wizard. I'd like to see Wizard, Electro Drag, or some of the other cards coming up in D could potentially consider them for buffs, because even if they're not really weak, I think it could be nice to add some more variety. Okay, so Electro Giant's S tier. Yeah, who would have thought that giving it 9% health was going to make it broken? It is probably right now the best win condition in the game, but here's the thing, it's not only because of the Electro Giant. Some of the cards coming up that I'm ranking will also explain why the Electro Giant's really good right now. It's not just because of the Electro Giant buff. There are certain cards that pair really good with him that are also just making Electro Giant decks incredibly broken right now. Then it's just kind of insane. So Electro Spirit's A tier. I don't think it's quite S. S is essentially, I think the card could use a nerf, and then, but A might not be quite at that point. It could be a nerf is justified for it, but I don't think it deserved one. S means it likely could use a nerf or a rework, or it might just be super strong, but maybe it's good for the game, and so it doesn't necessarily need one. I'd say E was his B tier. For the longest time, it used to be S or A, but I just think now there's so many other alternatives to it. E-Barbs are A. I think they're a very strong card, but they don't need a nerf. They're so good defensively, though. Elixir Collector, I think, is A. I don't know if it needs a nerf, but it is a very, very annoying card. I don't know if it's a card that can ever really be balanced. I think people are always going to hate it or just think it sucks. It's very hard to balance a card that essentially gives your opponent free elixir if you don't have the right answer to it. Elixir Golem, I think, is F. The thing is, the only reason why you sometimes see Elixir Golem and Healer, like Elixir Golem Healer paired together, is it's such an easy deck to play, so that even though it's weak, you could still win games with it if your opponent isn't that good who you're playing against. Executioner's D. It got a small buff, but I still don't think he's that strong. I mean, maybe you could argue he's C, but I kind of doubt it, to be honest, because I just think, I don't know, I don't think it's that good. Fire Spirit is S. I do believe it could use a small nerf because it just deals so much damage from one elixir, and there's like no risk ever playing a Fire Spirit at the bridge, and unlike the Electro Spirit, Ice Spirit, and other spirits coming up, it's very painful ignoring it, the amount of damage it deals. I would say I actually think arrows are A tier. I think they're a very good spell, just the radius they take up, and they're a pretty versatile card. I feel like you could use it in a lot of different things. Even though you mostly see it, Lava's the most popular deck it's in, you could for sure see it in a lot of other things. Like sometimes even people use it with Golem, you could use it with Giant Graveyard, and it just, the radius it has is what makes it so strong. Fireball's S tier. Some people even said it could use like a small nerf. I don't know if it does or not. It could be the same situation as the Log, where kind of a hint that of course was an S tier before the nerf. So maybe we would see a nerf to it somehow, maybe a pushback nerf. I don't really know, but it is most definitely the best heavier spell in the game. Firecracker, believe it or not, is I think really bad right now. I would say it's D tier. I think there's not really much of a reason to use the Firecracker. Maybe ever since Champions came out, it's been a bit weaker. I don't know. I just think she recently has really been struggling to find a spot in the meta, because even with Hog, no one uses Firecracker anymore. Everyone prefers to use Musketeer or Archer Queen, so she kind of fell out of the meta. Fisherman is, I would say, B tier. I can't really say it's much higher than that because the main deck we see it in right now is RG. RG, of course, is really strong, though, but I don't think I could give him... I mean, some might say he's A, some might even say he's C. I think B's pretty accurate. Like, he's probably slightly above average as a card. The Flying Machine is gonna be... I think it's also B tier. It's very good in Fireball bait decks, but it's not too powerful. I think there's a lot of good counters to it, and, most of the time you can manage it okay if you have a couple air counters or Fireball. Freeze is... I would say D. It's kind of like the clone, although maybe you could argue it's C just because it's used in Graveyard and in Lumberloon Freeze, whereas Clone's just used in Lava Clone, but I don't know. I guess that's fine. Furnace is D. I don't think it's that good. Spawners all got nerfed. Furnace is, even though probably out of the Goblin Hut and the Barb Hut, I guess I'm kind of spoiling it, but I think it's still pretty bad, even though it might be a little better than those. The Giant is, it's either B or A tier. I actually think a couple months ago it was A after the buff, but now I'm not seeing as much Giant Graveyard, I think because of the Mother Witch buff, so I would say right now Giant's probably B. It's still a pretty good win condition, maybe slightly above average, because the Giant Spark is really good right now, but I don't think he's, that good. Like, there's, especially because of Electro Giant, I just realized Electro Giant buff has probably made Giant fall out of the meta a little bit. Okay, you guys might be surprised. I think the Giant Skeleton, it's either S tier or A tier. And I know people are going to call me crazy, but the Giant Skeleton is very, very good. Trust me when I say this, after the buff it got a 7% health buff and a 7% damage buff. I mean, that changes a lot of interactions. It is just really, really good defensively, and just now pressuring your opponent has to be extra careful to avoid, getting that bomb dropped on their tower. It really does get more value. I don't know, maybe I'd move it down to A, but this is, my own opinion. I personally think right now Giant Skeleton is a top 8 card in the game. That's my opinion anyway. It's at the very least top 10 best cards in the game right now. Snowball's A. I think it's a very good small spell. It might even be used more now because of the log nerf. Maybe people replace it with Snowball. Goblin Barrel, I don't know for whatever reason, but log bait has been really solid recently. I feel like Goblin Barrel is probably B. I think I might have had it as C before, but I think it's B right now. The bait's in a pretty good spot. Baby Dragon is A, not S. It certainly doesn't need a nerf or, anything like that. I just think it's a very good, support card that gets a lot of value for 4 elixir. It has a lot of health, and it's a flying card, and I feel like a lot of flying cards they're generally pretty good. The Goblin Cage is B. I think it's alright, but there's better buildings in it. But I would say it's slightly better than the Bomb Tower. A little bit more versatile because you can see the Goblin Cage in, I don't know, you see it in Golem, you can see it in Recruit's Hogs, you could see it in well, no, most people who use Graveyard use Tombstone now. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, Drill I still think is, do I think it's S tier? I don't know. This is really tricky. I mean, I know it just got nerfed and it's like back to his normal speed. If it's not S, it's A, but I think Drill's very good. By the way, Drill pairs really well with the Giant Skeleton. There's some broken Drill deck right now with Giant Skeleton Golden Knight, and I'm even still seeing Drill Inferno. I think it's, again, this is my list, and I know people might be shocked to see it. I think Drill is S still. It's so annoying to defend it. If you don't have a good counter to it, you have to overcommit, and it's just fundamentally just a strong card. I think it's just, and now that people have learned how to use it, they've realized, the amount of value it can get. Goblin Gang, I actually think is F tier. I think it's very bad. I actually think it's a card that could use a buff. I think it could get the 3rd Spear Goblin added back to it. There's no point in using Goblin Gang when there's broken cards like Golden Knight that just do so good against it, and also like Log, and then also guards, and just like other things you could use instead of Goblin Gang. I think Goblin Gang is really, really bad. Even log bait players don't use it. That was a card I wanted buff in the last balance change. So, the Goblin Giant is, I would say it's C, because it's mostly used in Sparky, but I don't think it's much lower. I couldn't put it in D because I still think it gets a lot of value in the decks it's used in. The Goblin Hut is F tier. I think it's just really bad. I don't know why anyone would use a Goblin Hut. I just think it's one of the worst cards in the game. Kind of the same with Goblins, but I do think Goblins are a little better than Goblin Gang at this point in time, although do I want to say that? I think they're both kind of bad, actually. I'm going to keep them both in F. The Golem right now is C tier, because Electro Giant's broken, and Electro Giant decks usually counter Golem, especially Golem Night Witch. I feel like Electro Giant does well against, especially if the Golem player doesn't have a building. So I think Golem's going to be weaker in this meta. I think a couple months ago I put it B. So Graveyard is, I think, B right now. I think it's going to be a lot worse because of the Mother Witch getting a buff and being back. It also had that one skeleton removed, but obviously that doesn't make a massive impact, but it's still worth mentioning, I guess. Guards are S tier. I don't know if they for sure need a nerf, but I just think they're a very, very good card. I'm going to say S is just, well, S, I don't know how many cards I'm going to have in it. I might change it as we get towards the end of the video, like move a couple things around, but S, there, might be like 10 cards in it, and just, they'd be the cards I'd say are top 10, or consider top 10 in the game, unless I decide to have 12 or something in there, we'll see. So, the Heal Spirit, even though it's not used in many decks, I don't think I could put it much lower than C, because it gets so much value for just one elixir. I feel like there's very little or small risk having it in your deck, and the potential it has to heal up a lot of things in bridge spam decks is really solid. So even though it's not used a lot, it's not a bad card. That makes sense. The balloon, I think, is actually right now B tier. I think it's, especially with all the people using Electro Giant, because Electro Giant does really well against Lava Loon, and Loon in general, because it usually has Tornado in a building. So a lot of good counters to it. And ever since I got that rework, which really was, of course, a nerf, it's also been just worse against buildings in general. Hog Rider's A, I think it's just always been a very consistent win condition. It pairs really well with the Giant Skeleton. It's another win condition the Giant Skeleton is used a ton with, not just the Drill. But yeah, Giant Skeleton is just a really good card in general right now. Giant Skeleton also is used with RG. There's just a lot of things Giant Skelly pairs well with. Okay, Hunter is A. Ever since he's gotten buffed, he's been back in action. Definitely not broken, though. In fact, you could even argue he's B. In fact, I'm almost... actually, I'm saying he's B. I can't even think of many decks he's used in except RG. It's kind of the same case as Fisherman. I just realized, like, because of champions, I think probably mostly because of the Archer Queen, a better ranged attacker, he's just not really being used as much. So the Ice Golem, I think, is actually C. I don't think it's that good. I mean, it gets value, like, in 2.6 and, like, what it's used in, but it's just not a very good card. I think there's just so many better alternatives to use in cycle decks now, like just, well, even Knight, like Valkyrie, or, I don't even know, but anyway, Ice Spirit is probably B or A. It's been better ever since it got that buff. Maybe B. I mean, I think just Electro Spirit's better. I don't think it would make sense to put it in the same tier as Electro Spirit. Ice Wizard C. I honestly think he's just average. Maybe even a little below, because he's just mostly used in Ice Bow and Graveyard, and since Mother Witch got buffed, we might not even see as much Graveyard. Inferno Drag is A. Very good card. Might even be S tier. I might change my mind on that. We'll see. The Inferno is going to be B. It got that small buff. Definitely helped it out. It probably went from D tier to B, because that retargeting thing definitely helped it. If you forgot what that was, it basically, when it was targeting on something and then it switched to another target after it died, it would take forever. Now it does it a little quicker, so that was the buff it got. So the Knight is... I want to say it's B tier. I don't know, though. Do I want to put it A? Nah, I think it's B. It's just... It's like average or like slightly above. I don't know. I mean, that's debatable. Lava's A, though. It's better than the balloon because there's lava decks you could use without the balloon. You could use that Fireball Bait one with the Skeleton King, Flying Machine. It's popular recently. Okay, Lightning in this meta is very, very good. It's not S tier because, of course, it doesn't need a nerf, but just it's so good with Electro Giant and just kills Archer Queen, really good against buildings, so lots of reasons to use it. Bandit's A, I think she's a very, very annoying card if you don't have the right responses to her, and just the pressure she provides spammy decks. I just think she's a very, very just strong card. Of course, not broken, though. Lumberjack, I actually think is C. I just think he's not that good. I mean, he's mostly just used in Lumberloon Freeze. He's definitely fallen out. He's fell out of the meta quite a lot. He used to be like S tier a couple years ago, but now I just think there's a lot of better options. Magic Archer's A, just for the sole fact that he's a really good win condition. Like, he's always in a lot of decks as secondary win condition. You can pair him with the Tornado, so This is another like drill deck that's really strong right now. The Magic Archer Tornado one, so that's why drill is S. Drill is so versatile. That's the main reason I put it in S, and it's just I think a really strong win condition when used in the right hands. And yeah, he pairs really well with the Magic Archer. Okay, so Mega Knight is D tier. I think he's pretty bad ever since he got nerfed. In fact, I almost want to say it's like F, just because I think he could use a small buff. Maybe, so you know how they took away 20% of the pounce damage he does on the first deployment? Maybe they could give 10% of it back. Yeah, I'm going to put it F, because I think he deserves a small buff back. I mean, the Electro Giant got a massive one, so why not give the Mega Knight half of what he lost, because that wouldn't overbuff it like they did to the E-Giant. Mega Minion is, I actually think it's B. It used to be like, well, do I put it A? I don't know. It used to be a lot stronger, but I feel like recently it's not been as used as much. I mean, I guess mostly lava, and because RG doesn't really use it anymore either. You'd much rather use RG with a champion, either the Skeleton King or the... I'm gonna leave it B. Okay, Miner's A. Don't think he needs a nerf, but he is a very, very solid win condition. Mini P.E.K.K.A.'s B, I would say. Well, actually, I'd say A. I think after the buff, it's been very good, especially in, well, actually, multiple things. I was going to say Cycle, like Hog Cycle, but then also Sparky, and I just think on defense, it's super good against tanks. Minion Horde is going to be like, I don't know where I would put Minion Horde, actually. This is a tough one. Would I put it D, or would I put it C? And then Minions, too. Ooh, this is really tough. Minions, I think, are a little better than Minion Horde. I would give Minions B. I think they're a safer card to use in general. You see them often in Lava, Sparky, maybe a couple funky off-meta decks, whereas Minion Horde, I feel like, I don't know, they're kind of it's a risky card to use. It's like it either gets a lot of value or it doesn't. Like, let's say you're against a lightning deck, then it's going to get a lot of value, right? But if you're against someone using arrows, then it gets none. So it really depends on the matchup. So I would say it's below average, because any card that's, I think, a really risky matchup dependent card isn't going to be too strong, unless it's like really broken, like the E-Giant. But E-Giant doesn't have many bad matchups right now because of how strong it is, and this is one of the reasons why, because of the mirror. Mirror pairs really well with Electro Giant, especially when you have a champion in the deck, because then you cycle so quickly because you can't mirror a champion. So you can, like, what you can do is you can play an Electro Giant, and then you can play a Golden Knight, but you can still mirror the Electro Giant after playing the Golden Knight, and they use all their, elixir and, like, defenses to defend it. You can just mirror another Electro Giant at the bridge. That's why this combination is so broken. I don't think mirror's S because I don't think it needs a nerf, but it pairs so well with E-Giant. Mortar right now is A, because it's just right now, I would say that, sorry, it's S. It's S. I just changed my mind. It needs a nerf. I was a strong believer that in the last balance it needed a health nerf. It is really strong right now. I know that might come off as a surprise to some of you guys, but it's just so good, and all the champions are last. So, well, I bet you guys could guess what tier a lot of them are in anyway. But okay, so Barbarrel is not very good after the nerf it got. It's probably D tier right now. If you guys didn't know, Barbarians got a buff, so they decided to reduce the range of the Barbarrel. Now it's, if you play it at the bridge, it only gets one shot in your opponent's tower if left ignored instead of two, so not that good. Mother Witch is probably A tier after the buff. Yeah, A seems about right. I'm seeing her a lot more, and just gets a lot of value. Very annoying card to deal with if you don't have a Fireball. Musketeer is actually also going to be A, where I'm realizing we're having a lot of A tiers. See if I rearrange stuff around later, but I'm liking where most of the stuff is right now. I think the Night Witch is, even after the buff, I would still put it B. I think it's nothing too crazy, but probably better than C, especially after the buff. Okay, P.E.K.K.A. is actually not in an amazing spot right now. It doesn't even do that great against E-Giant, so I would say it's C. Yeah, P.E.K.K.A.'s like not that good. It's below average right now, I'd say. The poison is probably B. I think Fireball's better, but the Dex poison's used in like Graveyard primarily gets a lot of value. Prince is do I say that's B or C? I think it's C. Yeah, C makes more sense. Princess is, I also think C. And then Rage I would put in D. It's kind of a just like a fun card that's used in Sparky and Elixir Golem. And that's two archetypes, so I wouldn't put it F because, yeah, usually stuff that's in D, you could see it in more than just one thing. But then you could argue, well, then why isn't the Firecracker F? Because I don't see that in, like, any deck that's good right now. I don't know. Okay, Ramrider is actually really kind of bad after the nerf. Well, I don't know if it's really, really bad, but she's a lot worse. So I would almost say she might be borderline F, but no, I think ones in F are worse. So I would say she's D, but she's definitely a lot worse now after they reduced the effect of her stun. I think that's what they did. Okay, so the Rascals are B. Even after all the buffs they had, I still don't think they're they're like a super strong card or anything. Barb Hut's F, it's just a... Well, after the Barbs... No, it's still bad. Even though the Barbarians got buffed, it's still a bad card. I'm not going to change my mind on that. Okay, I don't know what it is, but Rocket in this meta is really, really good. It's going in A tier because it just... There's that E-Giant Mirror Rocket Cycle deck. There's also Logbait making a comeback, and... I don't know, man. Rocket just seems like it's really good right now. Delivery's B, or is it C? I'm going to say B. Ghost got a small nerf. I still think it's a B tier card. Very good. Definitely not dead. I think people overreacted a little bit. Definitely still a really solid card. It might even be A, but I've been seeing a little less of it this meta, not going to lie, so I'm going to put it B. RG, I think, is A. Very solid win condition. Don't know if it needs a nerf, but great win condition. Royal Hogs, I would say, is... I would probably say they're also A, or would I say they're B? I feel like for some reason I'm seeing less of them in Recruits Hogs, but I don't know. Maybe I'll put them B. I think actually right now they're B. I think that's fair. Recruits are also, I think... You know what? Would they be C, maybe? Because they're only used in one deck. Just the Recruits Hogs. Yeah, I'm going to say they're C. Or would they be B? I don't know. I don't know if that feels right putting them in C. I'm going to put them in B. Skarmy is like... Skarmy is really solid right now because of Skeleton King. I think it synergizes so well with it. Skeleton Barrel, I think, is D. I just think it's a pretty bad card. I don't know if it's quite an F, although I do think it could get a buff. I think F is kind of fair, but Skeleton Dragons are also kind of bad. I think I'm putting this in F. Yeah, Skeleton Barrel could definitely get a buff. I think it's not a very good card. Like, no one uses that Mega Knight bait Skeleton Barrel deck or Mortar Skeleton Barrel. Like, there's so many better options. Skeletons are S, but they probably don't need a nerf. They just, very good card, very versatile. Barbarians, after the buff they got, I still don't think they're very good, but they're probably C now. Maybe people consider them to be D, but maybe they move up a little bit, but I just think guards are still a better option. They're mostly just used in lava. Sparky's B. I actually think Sparky's pretty solid right now. It's in a decent spot. The Spear Goblins are just, Giant Sparky is really good right now. Spear Goblins are probably B. I used to think, because Minor Wall Breakers are not that good right now, so I don't think they're A, because there's less people using that, and in Mortar they're not used a ton. Tesla, I think, is... Where would I put the Tesla? I feel like it's worse than Cannon right now. It probably is B. It's about on par with the Inferno at the moment. Because Logbait, I'd say half the time you see with Tesla, half the time Inferno. Log, after the nerf, I still think it's most definitely A. I would maybe argue it's still S, but I'm going to say A for now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we got 8 cards in the S tier here, and as I'm looking at it, it looks for all the S's seem to be okay. 3M, I would say it's either B or C. I'm going to put it in B, though. I think, they're average. The Tombstone is going to be A tier. Actually, is it S? No, I think it's A. I think it's A. Yeah, because I think Mortar's a little better than the Tombstone right now. I don't think the Tombstone needs a nerf. I think it's fine. What they did for that small nerf last time was good. Tornado's A. I think Valkyrie, would I put that S? See, this is a tough one. I don't think the Valkyrie needs another nerf at the moment. So I'd say A. It's a very high A, though. Like, it's certainly, just to emphasize that. Because that one's I'm kind of iffy on. Okay, Wall Breakers are a B. I think they used to be an A, S, but they're kind of fallen out the meta a little bit, but they're just so valuable for 2 elixir I can't put them too much lower. The Witch right now is probably a C. It might even be a B. I don't know. Witch is actually kind of decent right now in Giant Graveyard. The Bats are an A. Just a great flying cheap bait card. Okay, Queen, obviously S tier. Golden Knight, obviously S tier, and it's going to go right on the front here. Queen is like, worse than Golden Knight. Here, I'm going to rank these in order of where I actually, for the champions, I'm going to rank them. Okay, well, actually, Mighty Miner, I'm going to say is A. I don't think Mighty Miner needs a nerf. Let me know what you guys think about that. I personally don't think he needs a nerf, and if they do nerf him, just a small health nerf. That's all I would do, because he is kind of a tank, and I agree he's got a lot of health. They could reduce that slightly, but I personally think he's in a good spot. I don't think he's too overwhelming or hard to deal with in most situations. I do think Skeleton King is still S, though. I mean, they removed 2 skeletons, but he's still really, really solid. So I think this is what I would rank the champions. I think the Golden Knight right now is the best one. I think he could use an emergency nerf. He's the reason why Electro Giant is so broken right now. Mirror's also a culprit for that, like why it's so strong. Just because of you can't mirror a champion, so it's so broken. And I made a couple videos on E-Giant, and you guys probably could tell yourselves, just E-Giant is so broken right now, and knowing how many mid-ladder players and just people in general, pros even too, how much people hate E-Giant, I have a feeling if people complain too much, there's a small chance E-Giant could get emergency nerfed. And I kind of want that too. I would not at all mind if they take away like 4 or 5% of the HP buff, because 9% is more than you think, especially with how well it pairs with the mirror. Like the level 16 E-Giant, the amount of interactions that change, the amount of health it has at level 16 is ridiculous. And then Golden Knight is just could use a health nerf. It has so much health, gets so much value, the dashing and everything, and yeah. But yeah, all the champions are really, really broken, with the exception of maybe Mighty Miner. Mighty Miner's the one that's in a good spot, because even though he's most definitely above average as a card, maybe you could even argue he's at the low end of S tier. I think he should stay where he's at, because champions should be strong, but they just shouldn't be way too strong, and completely control and dominate the meta. Like right now, these 3 champions kind of are, which is why they could be toned down a little bit. Archer Queen, you could argue, okay, maybe there's a small chance she doesn't need a nerf, but I think she still does. But most definitely the Golden Knight right now. But anyway, that is going to be my tier list. I hope you guys did end up enjoying it. As I said at the beginning, and I think just a couple of minutes ago, you guys can let me know in the comments what you guys agree with, what you disagree with. There might have been a couple things that I got wrong, because obviously, well, I mean, maybe you didn't know this, I don't really, before these videos, I don't like write notes. I just, kind of rely on my, it is a good thing to rely on, because I do have a lot of knowledge of this game because I play it daily. But if I'm going over the cards quickly, it could mess something up. But I think overall this is a good, I would say, ranking overall where I would personally rank these cards. So yeah, make sure to like the video if you guys did end up enjoying it. Subscribe if you guys are not subscribed already, and thanks again until next time, guys.